Everyone, welcome to Impact 2020 Allyship and Solidarity. My name is Shaina Salvaraju.
My name is Tamvu. Before we begin, we would like to go over the landing agreement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scatito, Golden Hill Paugussett, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example.
For those of you who are not familiar with Impact, we highly recommend that you watch our introductory video, which explains what the conference is and the theme for this year. We are thankful that you took the time out of your day to listen to these conversations and look forward to hearing your thoughts about them. Hello everyone, welcome to Impact 2020. Today's discussion is going to be on allyship and solidarity in the context of mental health. Today we have Amanda Waters with us, so I'll pass it off to her.
Hi, it's nice to be here with all of you. Just to introduce myself, my name is Amanda Waters and I'm a clinical psychologist and a multicultural specialist here at UConn in the Counseling Center at Student Health and Wellness. And I also have been serving as the interim director of outreach, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you and to have this conversation. So I'm going to pass it off to Jacob to introduce themselves.
All right, so I'm Jake. I'm a senior mechanical engineer, and I chose to talk to be in this discussion to talk more about how mental health affects our community. And I'll pass it off to Vicky.
Hi, my name is Vicky. I'm a Chinese major. I am a sophomore, and I decided to pick this as the conversation because I personally resonate with mental health wise, so that's why I decided to pick this topic.
My name is Amna and my major is electrical engineering. I'm a sophomore and I chose mental health because it's important that we talk about it, and I personally feel like we don't really talk about it that much. So yeah. And I'll pass it on to Mara.
Hi everyone, my name's Mara and I'm an environmental science and urban and community studies major, and I'm a senior and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I chose this topic because I think that mental health is super important and is honestly the foundation of how people can function properly, and I think there are a lot of unique experiences that Asian Americans go through, specifically with mental health too. So I thought it'd be really interesting to join in on this discussion.
Well, thank you all for joining today, and really excited, like I said. And so just to open up the conversation, and I know you kind of gave a brief introduction as to why you picked this topic, but could you talk about a little bit more about your experience with mental health in the Asian American community, whether that's your own personal narrative or kind of what you've seen in the community?
I guess I'll start. So I feel like typically mental health in the Asian American community, especially for me, typically it's sort of neglected. So typically, I guess even at home for me, typically if there's any concerns or any problems that rise up, especially between if there's any concerns or it's oh, I'm not feeling too well or something, typically my parents would brush that off and say, oh, you can do something about that, just do chores or do your homework. Typically it's kind of mental health isn't a real issue almost.
Bouncing off of what Jacob said, I definitely agree that it's not really talked about, and for instance, it's if you're feeling depressed or anything, I've heard a lot where it's oh yeah, just think positive thoughts, or just don't think about it. I'm just but I can't, because it goes on to more than one day, because that's just not how it works. It's just I don't know, I just feel it's kind of it should be, I feel the older generation should be a little bit more understanding, and at least kind of learn a bit more, instead of just thinking oh my god, that's just a taboo topic that you should never talk about, and it's just just not, it's just not thought about, I guess, and it's just you shouldn't like it's like, oh my god, that's just bad thoughts, like don't say that, like I don't know, it's just like a really really bad thing, I guess.
I think also, jumping off of what you're saying, Vicky, I think from my experience, I think um, not only is it like older like generations and my friends and Asian American parents like um, kind of doing what you guys were saying, like in dismissing, I think the existence of mental health issues. I think on their kids, I think they also do it within themselves too. Because I remember that um, a family friend of mine, I think their father was going through major mental health issues and had to go. I think he like had to take off work and had to do a bunch of things for it. But I know that my mom was talking about it like it was a disease almost, and she literally called it a disease and instead of like addressing it as what it is. So I thought that was really an interesting experience with how I think my parents even view mental health among themselves and among their own peers.
Yeah, adding on to that, it's like when you discuss it with Asian parents, you could say like, oh, like people are going to therapists and stuff like that. They'll see it as a bad thing, like, oh, they're really mentally sick, and so they're going to like a therapist, something, and it's like a bad image, all right, a representation, whatever. It's portrayed as like a really bad thing for Asian parents, stuff like that, and like it's really important for them to understand, but at this point, it's hard for them to understand, so they just don't even think about it too much or want to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that generational differences between kind of older generations and current generations, or younger generations, and that stigma that kind of comes along with addressing mental health concerns. Um, lots of themes around like silence and what we talk about or don't talk about. There's a lot of different factors that kind of play into that. Are there things about the Asian American community that has either supported or not supported mental health for you?
And I talked about this in one of our journals for AMP too. I think as toxic as it could be, I think something like subtle Asian traits that came out, and I think there were like branches off of it that came out, like subtle Asian mental health, where people were honest, like even though a lot of it was in joke form, people were talking at least about their mental health issues, um, and I think I forgot to say this before, but I think for a lot of people and for some people, I guess, who are Asian, I think some of their mental health issues stems from their family issues and like those family relationships. And I think I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but for the first time, people were able to talk about it on like a virtual, like on like a internet platform. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so going off with what Mara said, I agree with her. So I feel like I guess the Asian subtle traits, like I feel like I send those types of memes to my mentee and my sister all the time, and my other Asian friends. I feel like it's like an easy way of sort of expressing how you're feeling without actually saying it, and like you can relate with it. And I feel like especially with like the older generation, like you were saying, that typically like it's like typically not addressed, so like having a way to like outlet sort of that emotions and expressing how you're feeling is definitely, I think, a good thing that we have.
I think like a common thing, like like as a support system, is like instead of going to like your family or your your parents, like it's like definitely to like other like sources, like for instance like your friends, or like maybe like for instance like what they were talking about, where they were talking like the subtle like mental health traits or something. Like it's definitely not the parents. I think like maybe like some people have tried and then like it just doesn't work out because it's just like it just doesn't really like per se, like for instance like if you go to your parents, they may not tell you the best things. Like for instance like earlier I was saying like, oh yeah, they basically dismiss it. So of course like you're never gonna really gonna go back to your parents if they're gonna just dismiss it, since like it's like your issues are real, and so you can't just be like, oh yeah, what I'm thinking is just obnoxious or something like that, I guess.
Yeah, adding on to what Vicky said, it's like I have like a bunch of Asian friends, right? And so everybody has the same issue that they're going through. And so they understand it more. And then that's why they're willing to help more than like other friends or like who think that parents are there to help us, but they don't understand that it's different. So that's how like your friends are helping you around it.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So that sense of other Asian American students who might be experiencing similar kind of responses from family members or other like elders in the community, are there things that you found that have been particularly helpful?
Well, I think it's just like when you sit down and talk to everybody and like somebody just has like a good advice for you. And so that's really helpful. And like everybody has their different experiences. So when we come together to talk about it, so it just helps everyone in their own ways. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, so really connecting.
Sorry, I just want to interject real quick. And I think also, I think like you were saying with connecting and at least trying to verbalize experiences in some sort of way or form with people who might have an inkling of your shared experience, because sometimes it's hard to verbalize that, I think. And even, sorry, I keep on referring to the AMP class, but the AMP class that I'm in, I think really provides like, when we talk about like the model minority myth, like it really provides like vocabulary, I think, to assign to our experiences that we've had. But before like having that ability to assign those terms to those experiences, I think just being able to get at least the idea of what you're experiencing out there with someone is helpful to just talk about it.
And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, Mara, would you mind sharing a little bit about what the model minority myth is?
Yeah, okay. The model minority myth is this perpetuated myth by society that Asian Americans are higher achieving and have gotten to higher success levels based on hard work, and it hurts. It puts a lot of pressure on Asian Americans, and it also like pits the minority like identities in the U.S. against each other. And yeah, it's just a lot of complex things.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if you would share about your experiences of kind of finding mental health support, maybe reaching out or supporting other people, and how has your identity as an Asian American person affected that or influenced that process or that journey?
So I would say that for seeking out mental health, typically it's been reaching out to others and connecting with other people along the way. So I feel like especially just relying on your family. Like I remember, I think Vicky was saying, like typically you'll ask them, or like if you've expressed any sort of like how you're feeling, typically it's invalidated. So I feel like especially being like Asian Americans, we have to find others to sort of support us, and in doing so, like we reach out to others and we make bigger, like, or broader connections with others, and confine ourselves with like how our feelings are with others. And I think also like I would always reach out to like my mentee, especially for like AMP and stuff, just check on like how he's feeling. And like typically he'll express that he's feeling stressed or stuff like that, and like we'll talk through it, sort of thing. Because like one thing I think um, going in like through college, like I sort of wish that like someone was out there sort of to like reach out and like ask how I'm feeling, sort of thing. Because like especially now at home, it's like the only thing I do is just schoolwork, and like my parents just see it and they just ignore me, and it's like everything is fine.
Sounds like it could be pretty lonely sometimes.
Yeah, it sometimes is, but that's why it's good to keep in contact with everyone, especially during this time. So that's what I've been trying to do.
How has managing the COVID-19 pandemic been for you all, and how has that impacted your mental health?
So for me, like obviously I'm like pretty sure like everybody like, you know, went back home, right? But for me, like yeah, I did go home, but it wasn't that great on my mental health because it's like I always like at one point I always like I started to realize that like, oh yeah, like going home is not the best for me because it's just like it affects my mental health. So like for me to just like stay home for such a long period of time, it just made me realize like wow, it's like really impacting my mental health, and I don't think staying home during the semester would be the best option for me. So I actually ended up moving out to an apartment, which is where I am right now, and I think that's been like doing me better than just actually constantly being home. So
Yeah, I feel like because of these online classes, it's just like professors in general have been giving so much extra work. And like one of my professors, we had a little argument, like a little class discussion, and he said that, oh, you guys are just home and like doing nothing. And we're like, but that's not how it works. We have other classes and stuff like that. So I feel like all of that combined has really been affecting it. And when you're home, it's just like you have so many family members around you and like they don't understand when you have work. They'll call you out like, oh, it's okay, you studied for like an hour or so, I'll just come sit with or something. And they don't understand like it's gonna affect you badly. So that's something that staying home has done.
Yeah, it sounds like there's kind of like a mismatch on maybe two different ends, right? Like what your faculty members might believe as your kind of capacity and what you're doing with your day-to-day life, and then also for the people who are around you when you're doing all the work, and what that experience might be like for you.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to Amina, and I'm really glad you had that input. Um, and I can relate to what Vicky was talking about with like um, being home, like changing how you have handled your mental health and things like that. I think like the transition to college is something so huge for a lot of Asian American students. Like it's like us. Um, my parents always talk to me. They're like, "Oh, since you've moved, you probably are really sad not having like us at home and things like that." And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not sure how much I relate to what you just said. um, but I think the greatest thing is finding that circle that you guys were talking about. When you talked to like the staff at ASAC and things like that, um, we're always talking like a theoretical sense about fighting mental health for Asian Americans, but it's really hard to find like a specific therapist or things like that that will understand the exact like issues that a lot of Asian American students go through.
Yeah, I actually can speak on that. Sorry, Dom, what you just said. Okay, sorry, two things that you just said that reminded me of something. I think, I don't know if you all relate, but I know with me and a lot of my other Asian friends, like our parents, as much as we love them, like during the school year, I think this is what you were saying, Amina, too, with like kind of not that they're guilting us, but they're like kind of guilting us to spend time with them, even though like you're in the middle of school and you're in the middle of like doing like the tiny ounces of socializing that we could do right now through COVID, and spending time with your family is really important. But it's just like definitely a hard balance, I feel like. And then two, that's the T. It's so hard to find an Asian therapist out here in this world. That's all I gotta say. It's just so hard, and I think um, for the few that are out there too, that I think that I've exposed to that are out there, um, it's hard. Like people are really packed and busy too, so it's just hard to, you know, pinpoint what you're looking for, I think, in a therapist.
That can be hard to figure out, like, what do you even want? What are you looking for in a therapist? And it's true because, therapists get licensed in individual states. And so Connecticut doesn't have a huge population of, well, people in general, but then also therapists. And so the kind of scope gets pretty narrow pretty quickly. So it sounds like kind of like the range of things. So sometimes asking family for some support. Sometimes it's ASAC people. And sometimes it's asking and looking for an actual therapist for ongoing mental health care. I know some of you have mentioned ASAC as kind of a resource that you've sought out. Are there things about ASAC in particular, or people at ASAC that have been particularly helpful or supportive?
I know a lot of us take the AMP class, and Jacob and Vicky both take it with me, so I think they can kind of relate to what I'm talking about here. Um, the class focuses a lot on like the difference between like just like Asian American and Asian sometimes, and how like we don't really, when we define Asian American, it doesn't like it includes being American, but when we define American, it doesn't always include being Asian. And I think that that's like a big component about mental health. Like we always feel a little bit othered when we seek out mental health and assistance. And I know at least like when I first went to a therapist, the first thing they assumed was that my parents were like physically abusing me before the thought of like just um like I just need help, you know. So it's kind of like hard to fully like let go of everything.
Yeah, so even like when you're trying to reach out for help, it feels like the help that you're seeking isn't actually really that helpful. But some of the information that you've gotten from ASAC and AMP class in particular has been helpful to give you some language.
So I guess I would say that like ASAC and like the AMP class in general is definitely like a way for us to like do some self growth, self like development in terms of like who we are as a person, figuring out our identity, and sort of like identifying like how we can sort of help ourselves in that sense. So in terms of like mental health and stuff like that, like especially there's always the resources from like um, Rachel. We have all the different support groups inside AMP itself, and I feel like reaching out and like getting to talk with them is definitely helpful too. So I would say that like in general, there's sort of like it's like sort of like in parallel. Sort of there's the self growth in the class and outside the class that can happen at the same time, which I feel like is definitely very helpful, especially as like as students like keep as they're going through college and stuff like that. So sometimes like our parents just they don't actually understand necessarily like oh yeah about the abusing thing. So sometimes like we're like people will get the sense that like our parents are just being abusive to us or being like harmful, I guess, to us. But sometimes it's sort of like a different mentality, sort of the way that they think. So I feel like being in ASAC and getting to like experience and getting to categorize like the different things that we experience is definitely helpful in terms of understanding what we're experiencing.
I'll tell you my own personal experience. For me personally, I think I had a lot of like what Jake was saying with like a different mentality that parents and Asian parents and my parents have. I feel like versus our West, like what we grew up in schools and our Western mentality that like um, even though I don't want to be like, oh, they're completely different, but there were different values and different things that that I think we growing up had to struggle or like in balance between our home versus our school and what we were learning, like in terms of values and also in terms of what I don't know, just like a way of life and stuff like that. Um, and I think that for me personally, I'm not gonna lie, I grew up thinking that like the American version of what I was learning in schools was the right way and like the most free way and the most creative way and the most like authentic way of living. And I think if anything, like events in ASAC, clubs in ASAC, and like conversations that I've had um, in among with other people in the Asian community, some of the Asian community at UConn, I think that's made me realize that like um, I had a really skewed viewpoint. Like I think that there's so much merit in the way that my parents brought me up too. It was just having to balance that and pinpoint like what I personally wanted to take from both of those experiences.
Thank you. We're having this conversation. I'm struck by like kind of the tension between some of the barriers to accessing care or kind of recognizing mental health as kind of like a real thing. I think Jacob, you mentioned that at the beginning. But are there things that you feel like are within your power, within your generation's opportunity to address, like the stigma, the generational differences, the cultural awareness of therapists?
So I think for us like if like from this point forward, like in terms of like our mentees or like people that we see that are younger than us, especially in the Asian community, basically
telling them that it's okay to reach out and being able to access these resources, seeking for help when you need it, is definitely, I think, one way that we can step forward in terms of addressing like the systematic, like, oh, mental illness is just a disease or something like that. And I think it's a slow progress, especially when like we sort of like we grew up with our parents and we believe in this sort of mindset. But eventually I feel like we'll get to the point where we can slowly change this through generation.
So since I was like growing up and things like that, since we're finding out like what generational trauma meant and things like that, I think around around the end of high school, I had a very like I think that I went about it the wrong way, but every time I had a conversation with like my brother and things like that, I would always bring up generational trauma. I was always talking about like how that relates to our family and things like that. And something that I really learned was finding out that it's not your responsibility to like fix the problems. You're not playing therapist. You're just it's just a problem in your community, and it takes like a lot more expertise to like tackle them. Um, I think so because of that, a lot of the focus should be on providing those resources. I think um, a lot of people bring up like UConn and how there's a problem with the mental health department, and like a lack of resources and things like that. And it's mainly due to budget, so I understand that. But I think just like making sure that any systems or communities that you're a part of addresses some of these issues. I'm sure that other BIPOC communities also have issues with generational trauma and suppressing their emotions, although the Asian American experience is very like tailored to the Asian American experience. Um, but making sure those communities address the fact that mental health like requires a level of cultural sensitivity and awareness.
So yeah, I agree with Tom. So I feel like the whole generational trauma, I feel like especially like our family, like if like our parents like have their own issues, but they don't talk about it. And like for us, like we have our own traumas and we don't talk about it with them. And then there's like this internal conflict that each one of us has. And like we eventually find out like ways to actually reach out. But I feel like our parents never actually get the opportunity to learn how to reach out. And I feel like there's like in order for us to actually get to a point where we can actually address like this overall like issue, I feel like just comes with more talking, really discussing about like these different things. It'll be like what Amina was saying, like small steps really to really get there. Even though like sometimes progress doesn't feel like very big leaps, it'll just be tiny steps to eventually get us to that point. So I feel like even like when Vicky was saying, like especially talking to her brother, when she, like sometimes he feels closed up. I feel like there's definitely like this the stigmatism, especially with like for like Asian guys, like the masculinity thing. Like you can't reach out, you gotta hold everything inside. And especially I feel like since I'm the only guy in this room, I feel like I can relate with that, especially when I have a younger sister, and like sometimes she's been, I think, more open in terms of reaching out for her mental health issues and stuff like that. I feel like when I was younger, at one point when I needed to reach out, my parents were like, no, you don't need this. And like at that time I didn't understand, so I just accepted that. But I feel like over time, as I realized that it's not always good to bottle everything in. Like in the end of the day, like it's better to reach out and talk to other people and get the help you need when you can get it.
Seems like conversations like these can be really helpful too, as we kind of continue to put mental health in front of our community and be able to have a conversation about mental health as kind of a normal part of our everyday life, right? And you know, sometimes people do struggle with mental illness, and we're able to treat that and we're able to address those concerns. But everybody has mental health, and so being able to kind of address and notice when we have emotions, right, and emotional reactions to something, and being able to kind of figure out what we need at that point in time. Like maybe we feel really angry at some point in time, which it gives us information about, yeah, there's something that happened that kind of contributed to this, and want to get curious about what it is. Or I'm feeling really sad, or I feel really excited and happy. What is that thing? And being able to appreciate the range of emotional experience that we have. So even using emotion words, I found has been really helpful to kind of just normalize, like, yeah, we have emotions. That's a normal part of being a human being. And sometimes they're a fairly easy in to having to starting a conversation about mental health or just kind of how we're feeling in general. I am curious, because we've had, some time together today. What do you hope for our audience, our listeners? What do you want them to take away from our conversation? And if everybody would be willing to share, that would be great.
I think a main thing to take away is that if you were like brought up to have like, oh, you can't, for instance, like cry or talk about your feelings, or just like thinking like, oh yeah, like this type of topic is like something that you should be talking about. I think you should try to like kind of unlearn that thought process, because like how we've been like saying it already, like it's not good to like bottle everything up, because in my opinion, I think it's just like the more you bottle up, it will like just eat you up more inside, and just like might, like if for instance like if you're feeling a certain type of way, it might be worse. And I think that trying to like find that like support system for you is a key thing, as well, as you can't go through everything by yourself. Like as much as you can rely on yourself to a certain extent, you also need to rely on other people to a certain extent as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think to go off of that, a huge thing that I think everyone here has been saying today is building support and community. And I think being honest to your own emotions and being willing to be honest about it with the others too. I think another thing that Jake actually mentioned too, I think the connections between mental health issues and social issues, I feel like is actually like super, super close. So I think just figuring out how we like break stigmas of other sorts and address a lot of those other social impacts that we have that are going, and social justice issues that are happening, probably will go hand in hand with our mental health issues, whether that be like, I don't know, so many different things, but yeah.
Thank you, Mara.
So yeah, I agree with what Mara and Vicky were saying. So generally, I think in terms of what the viewers should get from this is definitely that this is a small point that we've gotten, and there's definitely a lot more that can be discussed in terms of the different things that we all experience in terms of the Asian community. But just getting to start to talk about it is definitely a good way, I think, in terms of being able to address this as a whole.
Yeah, I also agree with what everyone has said. And just like finding your support system is really important. And just at this point, you just have to like, your parents will listen to you, but you have to be just a little mentally prepared that they might not as well. So just having these people around you that relate to you, understand you, can help you for the better is really important. And going to like therapists or something like that is not a bad thing. Just realizing and like accepting that it helps is really good. So that is what everyone needs to know.
Tom, did you want to share?
Yeah, so I think that just in general, making sure this conversation gets started and making sure that you're mentally like prepared to have those conversations. Sometimes you just go, I don't know if you guys do this, but sometimes I'll go into those conversations with my parents without the mental capacity to do so, but thinking that, oh, I could do this. And after that, it ends up like doing less, it does more damage than anything at all. So I think while at the same time addressing like some of these issues within our community, we also have to make sure like we're also okay and in check. And like the amount of emotional energy we want to give out, like we know about it, like we know that we're giving that away. And also I think that making sure that if we use like certain ideas and concepts and themes, we're doing it in a way that doesn't like divide people from the community. There are some people who don't necessarily relate to like, even though like we're all Asian American in this room, there are certain like experiences that different Asian Americans I think have to process differently. I don't know how to phrase this, but that's something that I had to learn like recently. So that's something I think is important, making sure that all experiences are kind of validated, that no one's issues are more or less important than someone else's.
Yeah, I really have really appreciated this conversation and all of your thoughts and ideas. And I think, like I said before, continuing to put this topic of mental health in front of our community is just really important in helping reduce the stigma, kind of increase awareness about mental health in general, and telling like general American society too about how we as Asian Americans can address mental health and mental health concerns. And I think that can also help with representation in therapists as well. because I know that's a really needed thing. And so yeah, but if you have questions about any of that, please feel free to reach out. I work at Student Health and Wellness, and so you're welcome to reach out to our office. But just as a last question, is there anything our specific community at ASACC can improve on in relation to mental health?
I can't exactly think of anything right now, but I just wanted to say I'm really happy that ASAC, because I know that last year in Impact we were talking about this too. Maybe this is already this like connection between student health and wellness and ASAC was already, or CMHS, sorry, and ASAC was already a thing. But I just remember students at Impact talking about like it'd be great if there was like an affiliated person through CMHS. So I'm really happy that this is already a thing. I will also actually add that I think something that Tom also mentioned too, I think, and I'm guilty of this too, but like recognition in that there are so many different experiences and relationships with mental health. I know that's something I have to think about more often too.
I think Shaina mentioned in the chat about having more workshops and events to discuss how this community specifically addresses mental health. I think that's a good idea. Do you guys have any ideas about like what type of workshops that could look like?
Okay, sorry to pop in again, but actually I was just on the I forget what her name was, but there was a Filipino rapper that was brought in by ASAC and FASA and stuff like that. And I learned a lot about like specifically the Filipinx experience, and I think maybe like these types of discussions within those like internal ethnic like cultural communities might be really helpful. I know I learned a lot that day, and I'm glad that I was a guest in that space. But there are even like unique experience within Asian identities, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I really like what you mentioned there. I think that it was a really like I heard a lot about how it like addresses specific like experiences. So I think that's like a really great step in the right direction. I think just like this general idea of bias and diversity education and things like that would benefit as a whole. Specifically talking about how like mental health affects BIPOC communities is really great.
Yeah, and like kind of we talk about like disaggregating the data between different ethnic groups within Asia, and knowing that we have different experiences and different backgrounds and histories and cultures that really affect us differently. And so making sure that we're kind of paying attention to those nuances is really, really vital. We really appreciate all your time. I know we're at the end, so maybe we can wrap up here, but thank you so much for the conversation, and I hope we're able to continue this into the future too.
That will be the end of our discussion today. Thank you everyone for coming and participating. We're really happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on the topic.
Thank you so much for watching our videos. If you are interested in obtaining PAC stars or sharing your thoughts, please make sure to take a look at the Google form below.
Please make sure to watch our other videos and to come to our live Zoom breakout.
Make sure to take a picture of you watching the video and to tag UConn PAC, UConn ASAC, and USG UConn for the chance to win a t-shirt. If you attend the live discussion on Zoom, you will also have the chance to win a quarter zip.
Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our session on Monday.